Hi, my name is Christopher Sierra. My preferred pronouns are he, they, and if we're kikiing, she. I identify as a gender expansive Latinx member, and I am Peruvian American. Please do not call me Spanish. My family is from Peru, and I speak English, Spanish, Spanglish, and this is what looking bilingual means to me.
In one or two very descriptive sentences, describe your relationship with the Spanish language for each of the following periods of your life: 5 years old, 10 years old, 18 years old, 22 years old, 25, and now.
When I was 5 years old, my family spoke just Spanish in my household. And so I mainly processed information in Spanish first and then English. By the time I was 10 years old, I had gone through many years of schooling and I began to think in English first, and Spanish kind of became a little bit more secondary in my mind. But I still practiced a lot because I still lived at home with my family who still mostly spoke Spanish. But by this point, my siblings were being educated in English speaking schools. So I did have some more reinforcement at home. And so English started to take the title as like the primary speaking language for me. 18, I basically became more immersed in the English language. And again, Spanish continued to take a little bit more of a backseat. Mostly because I spent most of my time in school, engaging in extracurricular activities, in positions of leadership. At 22, I found myself speaking 98% English, and that was mostly due to being a college student, and there were very few Latinx people that were in my classes and that were enrolled in music conservatory with me, so I didn't have very many people to practice with. I would obviously call home every now and then and have an opportunity to speak in Spanish with my family, but that wasn't often. And so by 22, it was like Spanish kind of took like an even bigger backseat. And at 25, I was pursuing my second master's around this time and engaging in a lot of research, of course, in English. So now I am 33 years old. I've gotten to a place or a point in my life, particularly because of the social climate that we find ourselves in, where I'm bringing myself to a level of social consciousness where I'm thinking more about embracing my identity as a person of color, a Latinx person of color. And I find that I'm like making more efforts, stronger efforts to really be in touch with my roots and my native tongue.
Can you give us a snapshot of what it's like to be a Peruvian American in classical music here in the States?
For many reasons, classical music has been plagued with elitist, racist, and even some homophobic tendencies. And when I think about my journey in particular, I was always like one of the very few people of color and even Latinx people enrolled in the schools that I went to. So when you go through many years of schooling and performing, and you're performing alongside like 98% white people, and sometimes you're not even getting the leading roles, you're like singing in the chorus or secondary roles, and you see that the standard of excellence is often paralleled or like coupled with being a white person, you begin to question your worth, and you begin to question like your place in the realm of excellence. And so I found myself constantly wanting to change my appearance so that I looked lighter skinned, so that I looked like the standard for beauty and the standard for excellence. I remember a specific instance where I had taken headshots, and one of my professors was helping me pick out those headshots, and they leaned towards the headshots that made me look more ethnically ambiguous and lighter skinned. And that only perpetuated this kind of like self-hatred I began to develop in a profession that really lacked diversity, in a profession that currently lacks diversity. Currently, I'm working to change that so that younger generations generations of Peruvian Americans or Latinx or people of color could have a experience that is more inclusive and have an experience that allows them to really delve into the art without questioning their worth and their excellence for being who they are. And I'm working towards like rebuilding curricula. Like currently, I'm a professor of voice at Butler University, and together, me and my colleagues are working hard to develop a curricula that celebrates the contributions of people of color. We are doing our part to recruit students of color and faculty of color so that students can see themselves in the faculty and can see a future for themselves as musicians. In spite of the challenges that I've faced as a Peruvian American in higher education, in the arts, in classical music, I'm doing my part to change that rhetoric, to change the reality of what classical music has been, like elitist, exclusive art form, so that it is truly inclusive, truly embraces like people from all backgrounds.
Amazing. That's really amazing work that I think a lot of the arts can learn from. Tell the following people what they can gain from your journey with bilingualism and biculturalism. Peruvian Americans and other Latino Americans, and Peruvian/Latino musicians.
For my Peruvian Americans or Latino Americans, I understand the challenge of kind of embracing multiple cultures, but try to find ways in which to do so that allows for you to step into both equally, allow yourself to embrace the differences in both, but also to find the commonalities and how that kind of shines through in the way we celebrate humanity through our cultures. Embrace both cultures equally with love, because both are valid and neither is superior to the other. Latino musicians, I encourage you to use your platform to make necessary social and political statements so that the changes that we need to happen in our profession happen. People that are going to perform Bach, there are plenty of people that are going to perform Mozart, there are plenty of people that are going to perform works by people that already have a voice. So use your platform to feature the music of artists that are not represented. Don't allow yourself to be tokenized. You can step into a role that's traditionally performed by, say, a white person or somebody who would conventionally be like a Caucasian character, and you can still embrace your true authentic self and find a voice in that character.
For you personally, when did you realize it was time for you to re-embrace the language? Because we had a whole conversation, which is how we got here, right? About you re-embracing the Spanish language. So how did that happen?
One of the first times I realized that I wanted to re-embrace the Spanish language was when I was at dinner with my family. They expressed that they wanted to learn more about what I was learning at school: voice science, vocal function, how to teach the voice. There were certain things that I could explain and translate really well in Spanish, but there were pedagogical words that I really struggled with because I had no idea how to say them in Spanish. And the first thing that popped into my mind was, if I ever had an opportunity to teach like a course in Spanish or have an opportunity to like give a master class in Spanish, I would really struggle. Recently, actually, I had to give a vocal masterclass completely in Spanish. And I had to be able to communicate pedagogical terms that of course, I know very well in English, but I couldn't, like in a fluid manner, express myself with those terms in Spanish. So it inspired me to really like do more research about vocal pedagogy and to translate that in Spanish and to be able to become more fluid in the way that I express myself. I guess in a more academic way rather than a vernacular kind of sense.
And that's amazing, isn't it? How we develop, unless we're in a dual language educational system, there's no way, unless you're putting in this super extra effort, or maybe you're working in 2 different countries, that you're going to develop the same vocabulary at the same level as you are in whatever you're going to school in. It's really difficult. You can even be a native in both languages, speaking it from birth perfectly, but once you start going to school, and if you're not going in both languages, and I mean, obviously you're doing a doctorate or a master's, you know, who's going to take the time to be like, and now let's do that again, en español.
Right, exactly.
That's a really difficult thing that people don't understand. They're like, why don't you know that word? And I'm like, I never talked about this with my grandma. And also, this is my master's program. Or
Sure.
this is a conversation I've never had.
I mean, first of all, none of my professors spoke Spanish. You know, there were very few, if at all, any professors that were Latinx. So I certainly never had an opportunity to engage in dialogue with a professor, kind of informally, using my native tongue. It was always just English, English, English. So yeah, I think it's interesting that I remember there being like a little bit of judgment from my parents' side when I wasn't able to articulate myself fully and explain the processes of healthy singing completely in Spanish. Of course, I have to be understanding with myself in that I didn't have opportunities to really do that, you know, and to really engage with other people, other colleagues, say like in Spanish, because I didn't have any Spanish speaking colleagues. I was it, you know, I was one of the very few.
This is why this project is so important to me, because I am only now not allowing myself to judge myself for something that I couldn't control. I can't go back and redo high school and college and my master's all in Spanish. I can't do everything the same way to develop in that way. And I'm trying to remind myself, I'm like, I've come pretty far considering the fact that I wasn't really set up for success. And that's not a shot at anybody other than the fact that when you're between these two worlds, ni de aquí ni de allá, is that we're perfectly fine where we are. And it's amazing that we've been able to do what we have been able to do. And in the languages that we've been able to do it in.
So many moments in my life and in my journey as a classical musician and as just a developing human, where I've kind of like had to ask myself, like, why don't I know the Spanish speaking language as good? And whether it be because I'm in an English speaking school most of the time, or whether it be because there's hints of shame, I've gotten to a point now where I have a better understanding for it. And there are things, of course, like you mentioned, that I have to be more forgiving about. You know, the things that I couldn't control. I couldn't control that in my school there was no diversity, or in the schools that I went to there was no diversity, and there were no professors or students that I could really engage. What I can control is the sense of shame that I might feel. You don't want to feel othered, and you don't want to be embarrassed for speaking a language that nobody else does, or the majority of people don't speak. And so embracing my Latinx roots allowed me to also get further in touch with my gender identity, my true gender identity, and the fluidity of it. Be less hard on myself for that. Be less ashamed, be more proud that I am unique, that I do stand out because of those things, especially in my professions. Like I said, I just recently gave this masterclass completely in Spanish, and I'm like, wow, even though I didn't do like the best job, because I know that there's still things I'm working out in Spanish, I got to do that. And it was so cool to be in a position where I'm navigating my knowledge under a different set of circumstances with different people who embrace a different reality. And there's just something really beautiful about being able to do that in multiple contexts, not just in English, but in Spanish, you know?